Kamala Harris won't sit for an interview. She won't tell us what she'd do when she becomes president. She's scripted. She's teleprompted. She's cultivated. It's managed. She was foisted on us. Nobody voted for her in this role. This is their attempt to bring down Trump, because you see, Trump was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Trump was handed everything, but they're for the underdog. They had college debt unpaid when they left Springfield, Illinois, Chicago, Illinois to come to Washington, and they now have mansions on Martha's Vineyard, blah, blah, etc., ad nauseum. But they know the suffering of others. They're not for themselves. You see, Trump is just for himself. I mean, such bullshit, and yet so artfully delivered with such confidence and panache. They delivered it with the command of a master of the universe, because that's what they are. Jimmy Carter is the kind of Democratic ex-president that their rhetoric would lead you to think they would be, but they're exactly the opposite. They think we're fools. They want to lead us around with a ring through our nose. Not just black people, of course, black people, but all the white people who aspire to be on the right side of the race question, who aspire to be just and virtuous and to think well of themselves. They got as much to do with the historic liberatory struggles that those spirituals invoke as Donald Trump has to do with entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley or something like that. Capitalism is a good thing. Donald Trump doesn't embody it. Freedom struggles are a good thing. Kamala Harris doesn't embody it. Hello, everybody. This is Glenn Loury, and you've tuned into The Glenn Show. The Glenn Show is brought to you by the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, where I am John Paulson Senior Fellow, and I'm also professor of economics and of the social sciences at Brown University. Every other week at The Glenn Show, John McWhorter of Columbia University and the New York Times and I have a conversation, and you are fortunate enough to have joined us on one of those weeks. Hey there, John. What's up?
Not much. Summer's coming to an end. I am on sabbatical, so I am not preparing to teach. And yeah.
Oh, that's major news, man. What are you preparing to do?
You know, not as much as many people might think. To be honest, I'll share this. About 6 months ago, I got kind of burnt out. And, burnout for me means, I still have to crank out my weekly column, etc. But I'm not going to be writing a book proper during the sabbatical. There might be an audiobook, but not a book. And I've got various little projects, but I just need to breathe. And so I'm going to try.
You're supposed to be taking a field trip to Borneo or somewhere to study the linguistic habits of an obscure people.
That is something.
Why are you not doing something like that?
A linguist would actually do that, because that's too much work. I'd rather sit in chairs. Borneo would actually be just the place I might choose. But no, none of that. So I'm going to keep learning things. I think we've talked about how one academic needs to go back to the woodshed. You used that expression, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I need some linguistics woodshedding. I need to learn some new stuff and kind of get my claws sharp again. So I'm going to do some of that, because I'm going to have time to actually sit and read and think and have ideas, which I haven't had much of, especially over the past 3 or 4 years. So woodshed, basically. How are you, Glenn, is what people are wondering.
That's what sabbatical. That's what sabbatical is for. It's to recharge, and it's a good thing. One of the great perks of the academic vocation, every 5, 6, 7 years, you get a full year off and you can do whatever you want to do with it.
It's pretty spectacular.
How am I? Well, I'm recovering. I'm continuing to recover, and I'm doing my exercises and getting my walks in, and I'm better. Sleeping well. This is from back surgery. April 10th was D-Day for me. Massive spinal fusion, operating in 3 different locations in the vertebrae, etc. Steel rods, pins, screws, bone shavings, etc. I won't go on longer about that, because it was April 10th, and here we are at the end of August. And I'm, pain-free. I'm drug-free.
Hey, that's good.
And I'm recovering more and more function with each passing week. So I can't complain. I, like you going on sabbatical, have a special year ahead of me. It's my last year before I take formal retirement from Brown University, where I'm the Merton P. Stoltz Professor, and I will be Professor Emeritus in due course. And I'm in a transition phase in my own life, and am asking myself some of these kinds of questions of, what do I do with my time and what do I really care about? And recharging is one of the things that I thought might be pretty cool.
Mhm.
Just deciding I wanted to learn about the French Revolution, or I wanted to learn about, quantum mechanics, or, I wanted to read novels. Man, I'm reading an amazing novel. Percival Everett of Erasure
Yeah.
fame.
You mean that
His
other one he wrote?
His new one is called James.
Yeah. What is it about?
It's about, excuse me, everybody out there who's sensitive, Nigger Jim. It's
Oh,
about
yeah.
Huckleberry Finn.
Hmm.
He reimagines the character of the slave friend of Huck Finn, Jim,
Hmm.
notoriously known as Nigger Jim in the book, because that's what Mark Twain called him.
Hmm.
He reimagines this guy, and there's a lot of interior monologue and a lot of, kind of fantastical realism kind of stuff that goes on. The guy has conversations with John Locke and with Voltaire in his mind. In his mind, he has. In his delirium, he has. But I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to spoil this for people. But in real life, in the day-to-day life, he be Nigger Jim. He be Nigger Jim over here. He can't read nothing, can't write nothing, can't talk nothing. But in his mind, he finds a pencil. A slave has to basically give his life for this pencil. But Nigger Jim, excuse me, James, Percival Everett would appreciate that,
Hmm.
uh, ends up with this pencil. He says, with my pencil, I wrote my being into existence. I wrote myself to here. That's a sentence in the book that I committed to memory because it is so powerful. With a pencil. And I thought, Percival Everett is sitting there writing this sentence with a pencil. He wrote his being into existence. He wrote himself to here. The struggle for the dignity of the enslaved person lies at the core of this, I think, really masterful work, which I'm 2/3 of the way through.
You know what I'm reading? If we're on that, because I have something that's kind of complementary to it. I'm
Let's
reading
be on
Uncle
it.
Tom's Cabin.
Oh, wow. Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Yeah, and like you read about it, but I never thought about actually reading it. But a friend of mine said that it was actually good, which I frankly doubted.
Oh, I doubt that too.
Kind of
Is it?
long. It is good. I mean, you have to adjust to the fruity, grandiloquence of the way somebody wrote back then. And so, a lot of flowery text, especially when it's just narration. That was the style. But if you can kind of get past that, it is a crackling good tale. And more to the point, as melodramatic as it is in its way, it really does get at the horror of what slavery was. That's what she was working for, and she does it very well. What it felt like to have your family being ripped apart. And I must admit, I always look forward to getting back to it. Although it's, almost 500 pages long, it certainly is more tugging on my heartstrings than War and Peace did during the pandemic. It's actually, I can see why it had the effect it had. It's a good book.
You can't be comparing Beecher Stowe to Tolstoy. You can't be doing that. I didn't hear that. You know what James Baldwin said in that classic essay of his, Everybody's Protest novel, about Harriet Beecher Stowe. I mean, and about Richard Wright, actually, about the Native Son. I mean, he says this is by essentializing the protest character and the defeated character of the slave, of the dominated person, it robs them of their humanity. That's what I read him as saying. And I thought of Baldwin's critique of Beecher Stowe when the world went crazy about Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, because I thought it was very much of a protest novel. It's not a novel; it's a memoir, but it's in that spirit of giving eloquent voice to. I think it is eloquent in places. The dilemma, which Percival Everett is doing in his way through this character James. I mean, the dilemma of the slave, the enslaved person, the dominated person. So it interests me that novel interests you at this time, and you're finding it worthy of its epical status.
I'm touched. Yeah. Um, you're right. And, it is sacrilegious of me to say that the person who wrote Anna Karenina isn't as good as the person who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. And no doubt. I mean, Tolstoy was the greater artist in the general sense. War and Peace as narrative is tough because the parts about the war are turgid at this point, and you keep waiting for him to get back to the people. No, she's not an artist on that level. And these characters are set up to be about their tragedy. That's what you're supposed to think about, and you don't get enough of the other things. You have to work to imagine a lot of them ever smiling. Uncle Tom is an utterly ridiculous character. I see why he has the reputation that he does. I'm exactly halfway through. But goodness, many of the things that have happened and the way she describes them in that close, wordy style, which sometimes ends up bringing you closer, it does the same job that, say, for example, Roots did, even if he made most of it up. Alex Haley was a good writer. It does the same sort of thing, except, it kind of zooms in closer often. She also tries to take you into the head of the whites. And some of them come off rather well. She various shades of how white people saw black people and for what reason. She doesn't let anybody off the hook. It's, you should take a look and tell me if you find it utterly unbearable, because I never thought I was going to pick it up. But my friend, a white friend, she was right. I was saying, are you sure this is actually a good book? And she said, yeah, you won't be able to put it down. Right.
Okay, I will file that away under things to be considered. No commitment here. You say it's long. Life is short, by the way. That's the other part of the story.
I know.
Life is so short that I wonder, John, whether we should give any of our attention to the Democratic National Convention, which just concluded. This is Sunday, the 25th of August, we speak on, and the convention kicked off, what was it, on the 19th of August, on last Monday, and it concluded with Kamala Harris being coronated and with many speeches being given by prominent people at the dais, and with the Democratic Party both defining itself directly and indirectly, and also very vigorously defining their opponent, Donald J. Trump, who ain't shit. Last time I checked the DNC, Trump wasn't shit. He was not a serious person. He's not to be taken serious. He was in it only for himself. He was evil. He was bad. He was whatever. And Trump was a shadowy presence at the convention, but it was Kamala Harris's convention. They went wild. They were enthusiastic. They were joyful. They went crazy. And I dutifully watched a fair amount of it, John. I confess.
I was reading Uncle Tom's Cabin. Glenn, to tell you the truth, I have a numb spot, and it's not. I'm not privately proud of it. This doesn't come from the snootier aspect of my personality. It's just the way I am. I do not go for ceremonies of that sort. They just don't turn me on. And this includes, I don't give a damn about the Grammys. I don't give a damn about the Oscars. Even though I'm a huge theater person, I don't watch the Tonys. I don't care which shows win awards. And that also goes for these convention things. To me, what I see is performances, which is not reality. It's just these performances. And I like performance when it's performance, but when it's politicians made to put words together in charismatic ways and being applauded regularly, I just go to my piano or something. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't feel it. Do you feel it? Like, teach me how to feel it.
Well, no, I don't feel. I used to feel it when I was a kid. I mean, I'm 76 years old on my next birthday, which is coming in a couple of weeks, by the way. Anybody who wants to honor me on my birthday, you know where to find me.
It's everybody's birthday in 2 weeks. Yeah.
My 76th birthday is coming up. And so I've been around a lot of conventions. I remember as a kid, 12 years old, the 1960 election cycle when John F. Kennedy prevailed over Richard Nixon in a close call. I was 12 years old, man. I was reading the newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times. So I've seen a lot of conventions, and I used to get into it. I mean, with the roll call, when they would go to each state, and the states would say, Ohio, 28 delegates for, blah, blah, blah. I was into it, I was feeling it. And it's been a long time since I felt anything like
Well,
that
there was
about.
more drama at the conventions then in
Yes,
terms
there
of what
was.
they were doing.
Exactly. The outcome was unclear. You didn't
Yeah.
know who was going to win. But they are a kind of theater. You say you're a theater person. I mean, this is quintessential political theater, and the performances have a certain, I don't know, I can't stop looking at the train wreck. I couldn't help but want to see what Oprah was going to do when she got behind the microphone and in front of the cameras and spoke. She's Oprah. She's a living legend. She's an institution. She embodies a certain, in people's minds, a certain, in the commercial space, in the media space, she has a big footprint. But she was there as a political actor, and I thought she gave a pretty forceful speech. I wasn't persuaded by it. I'm not. I'm not about to go out and join the Democratic Party. I'm an independent, everybody.
How
Because
was
of
it forceful? Tell me. Like, I've read about it, but what did she do that you found effective?
Joy! And let us choose joy!
She literally stood in front of that podium and acted out this extreme hyperbolic expression of which I translate as, you want to be hip, you want to be in, you want to be au courant, you want to come with me, you want to be a part of the party, big P party, little P party. You want the future, you want joy. I mean, if you only read it, propaganda, because it was full of propaganda. But if you experienced it, then I can imagine if you experienced it in a crowd with hundreds of other people all around you also experiencing it to the same ecstatic degree, it was, I'm with Oprah. I felt that I'm with Oprah tug. Fortunately, I came to my senses at the last minute before I went over the edge.
I would understand that if it were music, if it were in a musical, or even if she sang. Like, I would understand that if it were church, but I can't understand it if she just says it. See, that's my problem.
If she could sing, I think she would have sung.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And it was a singing of her sort. The performance that she rendered was expressive in that way. You've heard me talk about Ground News. It's the website and app that I use to stay fully informed. They gather articles from over 50,000 news sources around the world and help you break free from algorithms and echo chambers. Go to ground.news/Glenn Show to see how it works. My favorite Ground News feature is the blind spot feed. It shows you stories that are disproportionately reported by either the left or the right. It shows you what the media is focusing on and what they are not focusing on. For example, this story is being reported almost exclusively by right-leaning sources. Harris campaign changes stance on border wall with Mexico. And this story about an event in 1994 is the opposite. It's being reported almost exclusively by left-wing media. RFK Jr. decapitated a dead whale and brought it home, daughter says. The left and the right do indeed focus on different topics this election. On Ground News, every news story comes with a breakdown of its coverage details. You can see how many news sources covered it, their bias distribution across the left, right, and center, and how reliable these sources have been in the past, and who owns them. You can't get this type of news analysis anywhere else. Another useful feature is what's called My News Bias. It's a personal dashboard where you can get insight into your own reading habits, your own media biases. Ground News gives you an entire toolkit that helps you see the machinery behind the news and propaganda. It helps you more easily differentiate between the former and the latter, which I think is vitally important in a democracy. My listeners who subscribe through my link will get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan. It's the same plan I use. So go to ground.news/Glenn Show, click the link in the video description, or scan the QR code to get Ground News for just $5 per month. I hope you'll join me in supporting an independent platform that's trying to bring facts, transparency, and trust back to the news. I also saw both of the Obama's speeches, which were well crafted and perfectly delivered. These people, no wonder they get $500,000 a pop to give a lecture to a business convention or foreign gathering of well-heeled people. No wonder people are willing to pay them $500,000 to stand in front of them for 45 minutes. They're really, really, really good. They if I were a billionaire bringing together my buddies around my business consortium, my hedge fund investors meeting, my industry titans gathering, and I wanted to impress them that I was at the cutting edge of global celebrity, who better than Barack Obama to have addressed my crowd? Of course, I'd give him $250,000 to do it. The only person better than him would be his lovely wife, Michelle Obama. But to be lectured by them about what they call the affirmative action of generational wealth, this is their attempt to bring down Trump. Because you see, Trump was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Trump was handed everything, but they're for the underdog. They had college debt unpaid when they left Springfield, Illinois, Chicago, Illinois to come to Washington. And they now have mansions on Martha's Vineyard, blah, blah, et cetera, ad nauseum. But they know the suffering of others. They're not for themselves. You see, Trump is just for himself. I mean, such bullshit. And yet, so artfully delivered. So delivered with such confidence and panache. They delivered it with the command of a master of the universe, because that's what they are. Jimmy Carter is the kind of Democratic ex-president that their rhetoric would lead you to think they would be, but they're exactly the opposite. And I didn't hear Jimmy Carter's name mentioned a single time, and I watched hour upon hour of that.
It's interesting. I'm going to get in trouble for this, but the Obamas, I love both of them. They're great. I'm not sure I get the idea of them as can I say, is this as gifted performers in that? You and I are public speakers. You and I know what it is to stand behind a podium. We have different ways of doing it. But honestly, if you've got short, punchy sentences up in front of you on this thing called a teleprompter, which is not what you and I do, but imagine if that's how we did it. Short, punchy sentence, it's up on the teleprompter, and you say it. And, you say it with a certain poise, and each one is designed to make people clap, and so you're floating up on everybody's shoulders, whether you want to or not. I don't mean to put the two of them down. I am not them. They are flying way above me, but is that such a great talent? I mean, it's one thing to just stand and talk and to keep people going. Talk about church again. You can talk about, a preacher and what they do. But sitting there and reading a teleprompter, how deft does that get? But maybe I'm just under analyzing it.
Well, no. I think you're raising a fair question, and it makes me want to ask another question. Who wrote the text on the teleprompter? I mean, you and I differ in the way we give public speeches, and one of the ways we differ is I typically will bring a text with me to the podium. I'll ad-lib from it, but I'll bring the text to the podium, and I will follow it to a certain degree. And as I've seen you perform, you kind of are much more spontaneous and improvisational. Nevertheless, you will have had, I'm sure there's an index card or an outline somewhere, a framework, and you will touch your bases. But
only in my head, but yes.
With a greater degree of, it's not rote. It's not rote.
But I have a plan. Yeah.
So rote is not necessarily disqualifying, says Glenn Loury, who is a rote type guy. On the other hand, did they write it? If they wrote it, I think you have to give them credit for if they wrote a good speech, they wrote a good speech. If they wrote and delivered a good speech, they wrote and delivered a good speech. If they used the technical aid of a teleprompter to write and deliver a good speech, more power to them. If they didn't write it, well, they're performers. And, performing seals would be an unkind way of putting it. And I think it would be unfair, both to
No.
Barack and Michelle. They are quite able to express themselves effectively. I don't have any doubt about that.
In front of an audience, right. Yeah.
Answering questions, responding in an interview. I mean, these are things that get tested in a campaign, unless you're Kamala Harris, in which case you can go a whole month as your party's leading candidate and not be interviewed by anybody and not take any questions from anybody that you didn't put the question in their hand first. But that's a side point. We talk about the convention.
Yeah. Well, so Glenn, the thing is, what was all that for? Everybody's cheering and yelling. You're kind of riling up the base, but the base would have been riled anyway. It's not going to convince anybody sitting on the fence. It's not going to. Is the idea that all of that trash talk about Trump is going to make Our Lady running the liquor store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, change her mind? Because I hope. But it seems to me that really all those people are just talking to each other. In which case, to me, it ends up looking like, boy, it's the same applause over and over again, all of this joy. But about what specifically and why this particular format? It wasn't, they weren't trying to change minds, I don't think. I hope they change some, but, what we're talking about is Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. That didn't seem to be what everybody was thinking of when they were talking about joy. Joy is much less important to that liquor store running woman than the fact that she feels like prices are out of her reach. Where was that? Where were the applause lines about that? And there were some, but it all strikes me as kind of throwing a whole lot of paint at the wall where the real point of it is the joy and the adrenaline. And Sourpuss Me doesn't completely get what the purpose of that is, other than that it's something human beings naturally will build up to doing when they get together. This party, If
you ask me, what's it for, and force me an answer, I'd say the following. I'd say it's about defining ourselves, the party. We are giving a statement or a series of statements that create in the minds of the public and in our own minds a definition of what we're about, what we believe, what we stand for, what we're trying to accomplish for the country. And it's about defining the other guy, the enemy, the person on the other side who's unfit, and making sure that as much as possible in the news cycle and the amplification of it, the public gets reminded about why that guy's not a good guy and why we're good people. I think that's what it's also about, showcasing talent in the party coming along and all the kind of networking. I'm sure a lot goes on off the convention floor of backroom this and that.
That I get. Yeah.
That's a massive thing.
Do you remember at the nominating convention for Obama? And it was the first one. The moment that always stuck with me is Michelle gave a speech, and then at some point her brother, Craig Robinson, who ran or runs some sort of very well-intentioned and important organization that had some sort of social welfare function. He was doing a great thing, but nobody had ever heard of Craig Robinson, and he's not really a celebrity. But he came out and he gave a speech. All he did was walk out, and the audience just goes wild. Nobody knows who he is. I mean, he looks like his sister, but everybody just went crazy. And I was thinking, why are they so excited about Barack Obama's wife's brother? And I thought to myself, this wouldn't translate into white. If Tim Walz's sister came out, it wouldn't be quite the same as the way they were screaming for him. And I just thought it's because they're clapping that Black people have families. They're clapping because it's wonderful that Michelle Obama, with her Black and oppressed self, has a brother who's standing there smiling. Black people have family and togetherness. Wow, yay. And it was whites. Just crazy that she has a brother. And I found this objectifying. And it was then that I realized these convention speeches make me genuinely uncomfortable. And he said some things. And the audience is just screaming. But what can he say? I mean, he's running this organization. It doesn't really have much to do with what the convention is supposed to be about. He's fine. That none of that makes you itch a little. There's a phoniness. I think there's a phoniness to a lot of it. You know?
Yeah. I guess I can't.
Maybe you don't remember that
on
one speech. But.
Craig Robinson. No, I don't remember that. I do remember him, of course. Basketball. Wasn't he a basketball player, coach?
Something like that.
They were both at Princeton, weren't they?
But he was coaching or helping youth. It was something of that kind.
Well,
but I don't know. It just.
You're the linguist, and I have some words. I want to ask you about some words. I made a list of words. We discussed this previously. These were the key words that I took away with from the convention.
Joy.
Well, joy is one of them. Weird. That was one. You want me to list the words and then, or you want to go one by one?
Let's go one by one. Yeah. Weird is good. I like that.
Oh,
that's
weird
nice.
Is good
because weird just means that you are against expectation. Weird doesn't mean weird means you're not normal. It means there's something normal and you're not.
And that's J.D. Vance.
I like that. Frankly, making it clear that these people who are positioning themselves as what America really is are actually a little creepy, or at least just not the norm. You're not offering us apple pie and Chevrolet. You're weird.
Now, how about this? How about somebody unwilling to say that in the 9th month of pregnancy, unless the mother's life is in danger, they should not take that baby from her because she doesn't want the pregnancy. That's a human being in the 9th month of pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And not being willing to say that. Finding every way that you can to not affirm that there are limits to a woman's right to choose is weird. Or how about somebody saying, they did a double mastectomy on my 15-year-old, and the teachers didn't warn me about it beforehand by telling me what was going on in her life in the classroom because she asked them not to. And that was my 15-year-old who was going through a life challenge. And these ideologues ended up taking her to a butcher to cut off her breast. Now, I, of course, put that in the most spectacular and extreme terms, but isn't that weird? How about somebody who says, oh, let them burn down the neighborhood. After all, they don't have enough investment. We understand why they hate the cops. How about somebody who goes to the bedroom of a Jacob Blake, a hospital room of a Jacob Blake, and expresses, this is the guy in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who, et cetera. I won't even go and look him up. Look up Jacob Blake. There's a lot of weirdness out there. How about an admiral in the U.S. Navy who is a transgender woman who a lot of people think, that's pretty weird.
There are a couple of places I'm not going to let you take me, but yes.
I'm not asking you to agree with this.
But no.
I'm saying a lot of people will think it's weird. That's what I'm saying.
Well, the last one I didn't know anything about, but there is no doubt that, and with Jacob Blake, it wasn't weird. It was appalling. It was just appalling that people went for the first story when it was painfully obvious from the beginning that he was just a complete mess. I mean, just a rather sociopathic person. And, there were certain people who were, in the hospital with him. I believe that Kamala Harris was one of them. That wasn't weird. That was just more of our sickness about, race in this country. But there's a lot weird on the left, certainly. I mean, the whole analysis of something as abstract as structural racism that holds people back and even explains that rioting, that's a weird kind of reasoning, sure. However, I think there's value in, just like, Black Lives Matter too, there is value in saying that there are right-wing ideas that are weird too. So that we don't have this idea that all the weirdness is on the left with the mastectomies, et cetera, and then on the right, what you've got is the Ed Sullivan Show. That's not what's going on. There's some weird stuff on the right. I find it clever and useful and even stimulating. If anybody thinks what I'm doing is just kind of regurgitating Times piece that I wrote, you were correct. But that's what I think.
Oh, you wrote a Times piece on weird?
That was my last one, I think. So, yeah.
My next word is democracy. You had a piece on that. I don't think you like the focus on democracy.
I think it's too abstract. It's just, that's not what the woman running the liquor store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is thinking about. I get the point, but you're not going to win an election saying our democracy is being threatened. That's just a song.
Well, it's meant to invoke January 6, 2021, and it's meant to tell you that Trump will undermine the institutions of constitutional order if he gets power.
Well, they should say
and
that.
You don't want that to happen.
Well, they should put it that way. Don't refer to that with a Greek word. It's too abstract. Yeah, I take your point, but a lot of people could miss that.
Now, the key word that I took out of the DNC's 4 days this year was freedom.
Mm.
Reproductive freedom on the abortion issue, social economic freedom on the policy front. Tuition loan forgiveness, help you buy a house if you're a first-time home buyer, ease your costs of prescription drugs if you're a senior, freedom to vote. They want the John Lewis Act that they couldn't get through the Senate enacted in the law, which would federalize a lot of regulations around voting practices in a way that the Democrats think would further their electoral interests, and Republicans think would harm theirs. So there's a conflict over the rules about voting, but they call that freedom. Stacey Abrams will be advocating for the freedom to vote, because if there had been freedom to vote, Brian Kemp wouldn't be the governor of Georgia. She would be the governor, et cetera, et cetera. Freedom. Not freedom from the government. Not freedom from taxes. Not economic liberty. Not the kind of freedom that libertarians celebrate, which is leave me alone. I mean, really leave me alone. Don't just leave me alone with respect to ending my pregnancy. Leave me alone with respect to spending my money. It's mine. Not that kind of freedom. Freedom to benefit from what they think the government should be doing for you and to you. Freedom.
Especially given, the notorious issue that, are you talking about freedom to or freedom from? You can apply the term freedom to almost any policy debate. And I mean, I think I'm going to stop being such an Eeyore and just say that using freedom in that sloganistic way here it's good Madison Avenue. I mean, if somebody thought it up, they were good, clever Don Drapers, especially because, nobody wants to be restrained. And so the idea that we're going to give you freedom is viscerally pleasing. And then also there's something subtler about it. When we say freedom now, especially given the personnel, we imagine Aretha Franklin singing it, and Kamala's brownness and the idea of freedom, everybody's thinking it, even if they don't know they're thinking it. That helps too, because the idea is just that this is about us. We're going to do what we want. And then also freedom from slavery. We Black people are all about freedom. It pushes so many buttons that I can't complain. But really, it's too clever by half, people sometimes say. It's not real, but okay. This is how language and politics and ceremony work. And so I can lean into it, but it's a bit much.
Can you imagine the campaign poster? I should hope that it will never actually be produced, which features Kamala Harris in the center, like that Time magazine cover, radiant and visionary looking, gorgeous, wise, a sage, a woman for the ages, flanked by Martin Luther King Jr., the iconic figure whose birth we celebrate every year in January and who is a national institution. He might as well be on Mount Rushmore. On one side,
who are you going to put on the other side?
Barack Hussein Obama. I'm going with you. I'm going with the freedom. Everybody wants freedom. I'm going with the Negro spiritual freedom. I'm going with the long struggle to get America to recognize its debt to Black people freedom. I'm going with our time has come freedom. Jesse Jackson weeping in Grant Park in 2008 when Obama gave his post-election speech. Kind of freedom. And I'm saying Kamala Harris is going to appropriate that for her political ambitions? And I say it with a sneer because that's the way I feel about that move. That move of appropriation of that is African-American historical inheritance on behalf of her ambition. And that poster which I hope will never be produced, would turn my stomach. They think we're fools. They want to lead us around with a ring through our nose. Not just Black people, of course, Black people, but all the white people who aspire to be on the right side of the race question, who aspire to be just and virtuous and to think well of themselves. They lead us around through the nose. They got as much to do with the historic liberatory struggles that those spirituals invoke as, I don't know what, Donald Trump has to do with entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley or something like that. Capitalism is a good thing. Donald Trump doesn't embody it. Freedom struggles are a good thing. Kamala Harris doesn't embody it.
For one thing, you created the poster. Somebody is doing it with AI, like as soon as this drops. But
I'm sorry to hear that.
I viscerally agree with you, but she did become a senator, right?
She did.
She did some things, but all of that would be performance art, and it would be a kind of appropriation, and I suspect even she would know it. I don't get the feeling she would walk in ignorance about that. I get there'd be a little of her that we would even know this is what we have to do. This is what one does. She doesn't strike me as full of herself to that extent. And I happen to, just by chance, this is not name dropping, I know some people who used to know her rather well. And unless they're really missing something, she's not the kind of person who would be so full of herself as to, like, say, Trump, as to actually think that was appropriate. She would know that it was just good politics. But yeah, that poster, which is going to be on X, formerly known as Twitter, and then reproduced in about a week, that poster is unfortunate. Yes. I'm picturing it Shepherd Ferry or something like that. Yeah, it wouldn't be right.
Here's another word. It's also a key word. Joy. Joy. As Oprah would say, joy! I mean, literally. She did that.
I have to go watch that.
It's unbelievable. But we live in a time of joy. Kamala Harris is bringing joy to the contest for the presidency. The big open smile, the euphoria of people who are so delighted that she's not Joseph Biden and that the Democrats are not on a death march to to defeat. They're joyful. They unlike hate. Hate is a characteristic sentiment that they attribute to the other side. Those people are angry. They're hateful. They're divisive. They're, Trump. They're petulant. They're belligerent. But we're joyful. We're hopeful. The future, another word. We ain't going back. A canonical refrain. We ain't going back. We're not going back. We're going the future, the hopeful future.
Well, how about this? I mean, I guess you would have been at home when Biden had his debate debacle. I happened to be in a hotel room. I remember sitting there and watching it and thinking, this is a complete disaster, but there's nobody else to run. There's nobody with the star power to take his place because of what people thought of Kamala Harris until about 10 minutes ago. Then all of this magical stuff happens, and I think, we still haven't quite figured out how she came to be received so differently so suddenly, but she did. And she's riding it because she should. There's a kind of relief that I can understand, and definitely just a sense of the campaign being a positive thing rather than this rather tragic risk. I am happy that it's gone this way instead of the way it looked like it was going to go until that debate happened. This is better, at least. No, she hasn't been properly tested. Yes, there's an element of the false about all of this, but she could win, and he wasn't going to win. But she could win, and I would rather that Trump didn't. And as you know, I feel quite dire about that, and so do a great many other people. And so I'll take this. Joy, maybe. Isn't it more fun to, quote unquote, open up the paper now than it was 2 months ago? It is for me. So we'll see.
Okay, indeed, we will see. Final word, fight. When we fight, we win. Fight.
I don't know what that means. Sounds good, but fight what?
It's not a cognitive thing. It's a visceral thing. It's meant to get my juices flowing
Yeah,
somehow, isn't it?
you want to fight because that means you're sticking it to the enemy. We know who the enemy is. Fight him.
Well, it's full of contradiction. We hate the enemy. We won't own up to it. The enemies are hateful. They are racist. They are anti-Semites. But we actually hate the enemy. We think the enemy is the end of civilization as we know it.
Or at least democracy.
Mm.
Fight him. Fight, fight, fight. It's a monosyllabic Anglo word. Very effective. It's a nice idea. You're going to fight. And maybe you can metaphorically extend it to, therefore, we've got to get the vote out. And that's a fight. I mean, just the sheer monotony of the mechanics of grassroots efforts like that. It's not dramatic. You're not going to make a movie about it. You can't sing about it. That's a fight. Fight your way into the dull work of getting the vote out so that this person can win. That's kind of a fight. But yeah, these are slogans. It's not about what is really involved here. But you can't say, knock on doors, knock on doors. That's not as effective. So you say fight. I get it. But yeah, it's just like the Tonys. But here we are. This is the best that we can have right now.
John and I often talk about higher education on this podcast. Of course, it's partly because that's the world we both inhabit, but it's also because America's higher education system is in crisis, the effects of which are felt by the entire society. Attacks on free speech, lack of viewpoint diversity on campus, soaring tuition, the erosion of academic standards. Last spring, we saw protests, encampments, and occupations, and cops in riot gear dispersing these protests. With all that going on, to whom can one turn as a trusted resource of all issues related to higher education reform? The American Council of Trustees and Alumni is one source we want to strongly recommend as a credible and respected voice on all these issues. We're pleased to have ACTA supporting this episode. ACTA is calling for a national civic education revival in America. In partnership with College Pulse, ACTA has surveyed 3,000 college students exposing serious knowledge deficits about rudimentary American history and civics. Not surprising, only 19% of American colleges require a course in American history to graduate. If you care deeply about these issues, as we do, you really must know more about the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. Start by looking them up on the web at goacta.org. That's goacta.org. And follow them on Twitter and Facebook.
Do you feel it at all?
Feel what?
That this is better than what was before? Or do you feel that she's a usurper?
Well, I'm not a Democrat, and I'm not rooting for the Democrats. I'm not saying I'm endorsing Trump. I'm not endorsing Trump, but I'm not enthused about the Democratic thing. Despise is too strong. Distrust is definitely appropriate, though. I think, so Kamala Harris won't sit for an interview. She won't tell us what she'd do when she becomes president. She's scripted. She's teleprompted. She's cultivated. It's managed. She was foisted on us. Nobody voted for her in this role. She was manufactured and put in front of us, and we were made to take it. Now, if I were a partisan Democrat, I would feel relieved that Biden was replaced because he was clearly unfit to serve a second term as president, and he wasn't going to be able to hide that from the voters. And Trump, as problematic, I can say that much. Trump is a problematic candidate, to be sure. I'm not a Republican either, but if I were a Republican, I would lament the fact that we don't have a better candidate because, in fact, I think the Democrats are eminently defeatable. And Trump may yet win. It's going to be close. But Kamala Harris has definitely changed the script on that. But relief? No, I feel resentment. If I were a Democrat, I'd feel relief. As a citizen, I feel, who are these people? First of all, I say she'd been lying to us for years about the fitness of Joseph Biden. She knew. Secondly, I say, who's running the government? Who's running the country? Who are these people, these shadowy forces? Big donors basically communicate that their super PACs are not going to be ponying up money for the Democratic candidate if it's Joseph Biden because he can't win. And in that way, induce heavy-hitting politicians like Barack Hussein Obama or Nancy Pelosi to whisper in Biden's ear, we'll fucking jack you up, man, unless you make the right decision for the country. You heard of the 25th Amendment? And this doddering, that's the way we used to talk in my neighborhood. So no, I can't be too joyful, although I am respectful of the political uh, efficacy of the machine, which righted itself before its candidate, Joseph Biden, went down to defeat the Democratic machine, and which has put Kamala Harris in our place. And I told you my analysis of it was they had to put her in our by the non-democratic means because she wouldn't have survived an actual competition for the nomination that had her going up against the Josh Shapiros and the Gavin Newsoms and the Gretchen Whitmers of the world. She wasn't going to prevail in that contest. And if she didn't prevail, the race mongers would have had a fit. Black woman, denied her natural secession rights.
Oh, Lord.
And so now you got a civil war worse than the civil war that you've got because there are a few people in the Democratic Party who sympathize with the Palestinians. Those people are easily dealt with. You wouldn't be able to so easily deal with the people who would bent out of shape about Kamala Harris not being afforded the rights she was entitled to as the second in command.
Oh, Glenn, you just, go ahead. You're not done?
I'm sorry, I did what?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you didn't interrupt. I was done.
You just reminded me of something, and talk about thinking about, where you're going over the next year and what matters to you. I just remembered something. If she wins, we're in for another 4 years of every time somebody criticizes her, it's about racism. And you have to decide whether you think it is or if you think it isn't. And you have all these smart people with 3 names hating you if you say that it isn't. It's going to be that. Remember that with Obama, especially for the first 2 years? Anytime anybody had anything to say about him except for hallelujah, it was because bigotry is still with us, as if we're still in Uncle Tom's cabin. We're going to have more of that because the people with 3 names have not changed a whit since then. They will not admit that there's change. That's just a sidebar. Why do you keep calling him Hussein? What are you doing with that?
Well, just like I say, George Herbert Walker Bush, just like I say, William Jefferson Clinton, just like I say, Ronald Wilson Reagan.
I've never heard you say any of those things.
It's his name.
I just don't see why you have to keep sounding that note.
This is something that Percival Everett deals with in his great novel, James. Have you heard of irony, John? No, I know you have. I know you have.
I'm trying to figure out where in the ironic box to put that you keep calling him that, given that starts with a certain crowd that I don't think you consider yourself a part of. But what is that? I don't see Richard Milhouse.
The right wing Islamophobic crowd?
Yeah.
Is that guy's name Rush Limbaugh crowd? No, I'm not a part of that.
Lyndon Baines Johnson. I don't say that.
No. This would be if Malcolm X's grandson were a political commentator.
Yeah.
This would be his reaction to the phenomenon of carpetbagger Barack Obama coming to Chicago and making himself into a black man and then running for president on the shoulders or the grave of Martin Luther King Jr. His attitude would be, fuck you. You don't represent anything like the struggle of resistance and so forth. I'm really from Chicago, and I ain't buying your shtick and your $500,000 a pop speech giving post-presidency. Your Netflix project producing Silicon Valley, all your buddies slapping billionaire, flying on their yachts and their private jets and whatnot, and living a global elite life on the backs of my people because you're supposed to be black. My attitude toward you, Barack Hussein Obama, is fuck you. That would have been my Uncle Mooney's response. Y'all have to read the memoir to find out about Uncle Mooney. That would have been Uncle Mooney's response. It would have been Hussein, and it would have been dripping with irony when he said it. So I'm channeling that.
I respect that. I get that. I just wanted to be clear. But I see what you mean. That can come from a different place than, for example, Donald Trump or one of his pals saying it. Yes, I get that. Just wanted you to spell that out, especially because not all people might see that. And so just wanted to, I completely get what you mean. And as far as, you're right, the whole Kamala thing, she's, it's been forced on us. I would rather see her and her operation running the store than the alternative. I guess just comes down to that. But opinions might differ in terms of how that was supposed to go. But I'd rather that than the other thing. But I definitely see what you mean.
The leading third-party candidate, or non-Democrat, non-Republican, independent candidate, the one who was getting the most play in the polls, not Jill Stein, not Cornel West, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has suspended his campaign and thrown his endorsement to Donald Trump. What do you make of that?
Looks like it's going to close the gap, that frankly I was happy
to help
about.
Trump.
And I mean, you could have seen this coming 3 weeks ago. Yeah, good for Trump. That's one for him. That's why I guess the Kamalaites are going to have to do this fighting and fighting and fighting. But good day for the Donald, because he needed that bump, and I think he was running scared. But I'd like to see Kamala get ahead some more, but that's going to take a little more strategy than talking about freedom and joy. But I mean, we knew this was going to happen.
Now, he said there were 3 reasons or 3 policy issues where he and Trump agreed, which was the main reason for him doing this. He said chronic childhood disease based on not paying enough attention to what goes into our food and the chemicals in our environment that's hurting kids. He said censorship based on government collaboration with tech to control the narrative in the name of preventing misinformation and disinformation, but in effect, to implement a kind of partisan thing. I mean, he doesn't feel like he thinks Elon Musk is what he's done at Twitter is a great thing, and a whole lot of Democrats don't think that. And he says, forever war. He says that what he calls the neocons, and they're not just Republicans like Bill Kristol, they are Democrats as well, want to fight this war in Ukraine, and they want to fight another war after that, and there'll be another one after that as well, because the military-industrial complex has an iron grip on what goes on. And he thinks Trump might be, first of all, in the instance of Ukraine, more amenable to seeking a cessation of hostilities, but more generally, less inclined to respond positively to the promptings of the neoconservative warmongers. Do you agree with any of that?
Do I agree?
Or you think there are issues that warrant serious consideration and could be a justifiable reason for supporting Trump?
First one, definitely. Although you can play up the extent that that's exactly what's going on. The second one, with the censorship, I would be inclined to go with what he means. I mean, there are extreme cases. Hate to beat on this dead horse, but what Trump in particular, that individual was whipping up, maybe deserves special scrutiny. But in general, that censorship problem, which ends up affecting, perfectly innocent people, yes, there's an issue. Opinions, I hate to say this, given my visceral sense that Ukraine needs to be supported, but opinions will differ as to how long that conflict should be supported. Yes, respectable opinions will differ. However, all 3 of those things combined do not strike me as something that would make someone put their lot in with Trump. None of those are wedge issues by themselves, not put together. This Kennedy person is a contrarian. He wants to do the thing that's going to make people angry, that makes him seem difficult, that makes him seem like something legendary and that stands out. And so he's going to do that. I'm sure he could come up with 3 things that he agrees with Kamala Harris about in terms of, even though she hasn't laid out that much specifically, there are things that you can reasonably guess, not to mention what she said. He could have put his lot in with her. He didn't want to, because the bad boy thing is to do it with Trump. But there you go. That's what we knew he was going to do. A year ago, you could have predicted that's the way it was going to come out. And so, yeah, it's just one more way that personality ends up affecting these things rather than larger factors or really thinking about how politics should work. But that's politics.
I think he is mad at the Democrats for not allowing him a fair run at the nomination, for preemptively keeping him out, making it hard for him or impossible for him to challenge Biden on the merits for the nomination when Biden was still compos mentis. And, I think he has a beef. I think he has a chip on his shoulder toward the party, and recognize that his polling is showing this. I don't have any independent insight into this, but this is what he says, that his candidacy in the states that are closely divided, where the election will be decided, was more likely to hurt Trump than the Democrats. So he had to bring his campaign to an end because he realized he wasn't going to win. He was only going to be a spoiler. And the way he was going to be a spoiler was to throw the election in the direction of the Democrats. And he despises what the Democratic Party has become, and didn't want to do that, and found some common ground with Trump. I actually don't think, although those issues are important, that when you consider all the negatives that a person could, as a Democrat, and Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. was a lifelong Democrat, hold against Trump. I mean, his coziness with Wall Street, his attitude toward taxes and whatnot, and also on the personal side, his from January 6th through his cabinet being full of people who now will not, including a vice president, support his reelection, think he'd be dangerous to have back in the White House, and so forth and so on. A lot of reasons to be against Trump. But I think RFK Jr.'s fury at the way he was treated as a good lifelong Democrat with a prestigious family pedigree, was not allowed to compete for the nomination, in effect.
Couldn't he be bigger than that, especially given his lineage? Couldn't he have taken a deep breath and done the larger thing as Biden was forced to? And of course, I'm presuming that we agree on what the larger thing is. But as you're saying, there's so much that he would hate about Trump. I think, frankly, he's just an asshole. He's an asshole. He's somebody who drives in front of you and because he knows he can get away with it. Little narcissistic. And he's just, running with it. It's very disappointing that he would pretend that those 3 things constitute some sort of significant alignment towards what is actually a whole worldview and a method of conduct, etc., that not only no one in his family would have countenanced, but that one wouldn't think he would either. Talk about not a serious person, to let those resentments make him do something that he knows might determine how this vote comes out. I find it small.
Well, you're assuming that you're correct in your assessment of
True.
states, and he probably doesn't see it that way.
He might not.
If he does, and it's as you say, then I would be inclined to agree with you.
Yeah, you're right. I'm making an assumption. Yeah,
honorable. All right, John.
That went.
My list of words has been exhausted.
Wow.
So, I propose that we call it an hour.
We've done an hour,
and we come back in a couple of weeks and renew the conversation. There'll be more to report.
Think about how much more there will be. Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think the debate will have happened by then.
Yeah.
The Trump Kamala Harris first debate, which is set for September 10th.
That's right.
So
actually, I don't think it won't have by then.
Oh, it will be just about to happen.
Right.
When
but still, there'll be other stuff. I mean, it's fun reading the news every day lately. There will be drama. There will be events. So yeah, we'll see.
And let me tell my audience out there, since I have your attention, to stay tuned. My lovely wife, Lawan, and I are working on a new segment for the Glenn Show that we're going to call Breakfast with the Lourys. And once a month, we're going to discuss the news for 45 minutes or so in the podcast studio, which is being constructed as we speak in our basement level of our home here. So I didn't tell my guys at the staff that I was going to make this announcement. And my lovely wife has agreed to this, although she didn't know I was going to make the announcement either.
You're going to have a breakfast show like in the old days?
Stay tuned. Like James Carville and Mary Matlin. No, we're not going to actually do it live. We're going to record it over coffee and then
You're really going to be drinking coffee? Wow.
Or whatever, yeah.
I'm going to go back to
orange juice,
Tex and Jinx. For those of you who've been around for a very long time, that kind of early 50s breakfast show with a couple talking about what used to be called the issues of the day. That's a really good idea. Huh.
Oh, okay. They were probably daily.
Yeah.
Monday through Friday.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is going to be once a month. But just to give you some insight into the quality of political argument that goes on within the Lourys household, because my wife is a formidable left-of-center advocate for her causes.
That is a brilliant idea. I look forward to Breakfast with the Lourys.
All right. Until then, John, until 2 weeks from today, take care. We'll talk.
You too, Glenn. Talk soon.